Love could be so cruel. Yes. You tell me.
Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday evening. Hang on a second. StudentLoanJustice.org live stream. It is Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. And I'm sorry, I'm probably going to be brief this evening. It's been a rough day. I'm a little bit under the weather. But I had a thought or an idea that's kind of been running through my mind for a few days that I just kind of wanted to present for the few minutes that I do have here this evening. And some of you, in fact, a lot of people liked, commented, etc., on a post that I put up. I want to say it was on Sunday, and I believe the content. I think the post said, cancellation and bankruptcy rights are non-negotiable. But and then something about accepting an apology. Obviously, I'm not sitting here holding my breath, expecting anybody from the Department of Education or the Biden administration or the Senate or the student loan industry or the House of Representatives ever to acknowledge even one tiny bit of iota of culpability in creating the most horrific predatory lending system in the history of this country. But it's an attitude, and it's an attitude that, I've been kind of chipping away at the last, few times I've been out here, hoping to encourage people to adopt the idea that we are not here looking for a handout or welfare or freebies. We're looking for justice. We are victims of a lending scam. And you know what? I adopted a new idea. When I talk to my elected officials or their staff or anybody in there, I also say, hey, when this whole thing is done, I demand an apology. I am sick and tired of, for example, the word forgiveness being used when what we are talking about is the cancellation of toxic, bad debt. Now, I don't know about the rest of you. The word forgiveness, I was brought up very strict Catholic, and, forgiveness is a term that would indicate that one had sinned against God. And forgiveness, of course, that there are other ways in which the term is used, but it always seems to imply, of course, that some sort of indiscretion was, somehow some sort of indiscretion has been, imposed upon another. And, so please we try to stay away from that word forgiveness. And I'll tell you what, you can laugh about it and you can joke about it, and I honestly don't mind. It doesn't bother me at all. But I'm very serious about the fact that you need to adopt the attitude that not only do I insist that you restore bankruptcy protections, not only do I insist that we engage in complete and total disbandment of this current system, which includes canceling all the present student loan debt, but for all of the dispersions that have been cast upon wrongfully upon the character of the people who took these loans in good faith, thinking, hey, laws in this country around lending are maybe not always as tightly tied to my best interests as I would like. But things like usury, negative amortization, just the very definition of predatory or usurious lending, refers to in every definition. I looked up quite a few of them earlier today. We're referring to essentially the attachment of highly unreasonable interest rates or fees upon upon a lending instrument. And of course, there's a lot more involved here than that. But I guess what I'm saying is, if we could encourage people to stop feeling as though somehow you have done something wrong, and that you owe some sort of an apology or an amends or anything of that nature, that's just bullcrap. And you know what? I even encourage saying that if you're talking to people about this, that, the naysayers, the haters, and so on, say, hey, not only do I expect full retribution or cancellation or whatever, retribution for me meaning dismantling and disposal of this current system and cancellation of current predatory debt, but for all the pain, all the suffering that goes on with the people that we are in contact with here at Student Loan Justice on a daily basis, an apology is not a ridiculous demand. Expectation of getting that apology may well be ridiculous, but so I just wanted to get that out there, and very quickly, Gordon Wayne Watts, one of our leading activists here on student loan justice, had thrown out a question or a statement, and I'm only going to address it really briefly. And it's a really good question, actually. It's referring to the bankruptcy bill that is in the Senate, which, a bankruptcy bill that puts some of the responsibility on the colleges, which is, quite frankly, where a large portion of the responsibility does in fact belong. The colleges may not have created the circumstances that allowed this system to exist, but they certainly have more than taken advantage of it. And yeah, Gordon's idea or suggestion was, how reluctant elected officials probably are, largely in part that if you look through donor lists, and I often have, and I often do, for congressional elected officials, you will see enormous sums of money from colleges, private and public colleges. And to suggest that, elected officials have probably many numbers of reasons why they have resisted taking any, legitimate and meaningful action on this issue. But yeah, that's a good example of one. Would it likely cost them money and donations from the benefactors in the colleges and the states and whatnot that they are holding seats in? In fact, many of them are not only getting large donations from the colleges and the states in which they hold their seats, but from all over the country. Yeah, I'm sure it was. And in Gordon's question, as I understood it, was, how do you overcome that? And the answer is exactly the same answer that I apply to anything that indicates, what you're talking about with elected officials who have some trepidation about taking the right action on this because they may miss out on some of the money that they've been getting from colleges throughout the country. That's an example of a political win. I know what I do know is that elected officials count on this money to build their coffers to hold their seats, meaning to buy your vote through their campaigning activity. So I think 45 million pissed off student loan borrowers should easily be able to change that political wind. It's a matter of one weighing, pros and cons. Sure, if they're not hearing from us, which they're not hearing enough from us, we're not flexing our muscle largely enough, we're not raising our voices highly enough, we're improving, we're getting better, but we haven't hit the note. How do I know that? Because the student debt has been canceled. Bankruptcy protections have not been restored. However, we have the leverage to overcome the weight that money from colleges carries. Because I tell you right now, as soon as politicians realize that we are engaged and that we are a cohesive movement, yes, they will throw colleges under the bus. There's no loyalty here. There's no integrity here. There's simply a desperation, desperate and stoop to any level to hold your seat, to hold your power. I've said this many, many times. Politicians do the right thing sometimes, but they rarely, if ever, do it for the right reason. They do it because their perception is that is the smart political move in terms of holding their seats, holding their power. I have no doubt that the money, which is in many, many millions of dollars nationally, that ends up in the coffers of our elected officials, is certainly something they don't scoff at. And it's certainly something that has contributed to holding them back from taking meaningful action. But we are, as a group, we're more able and capable of overcoming that particular, bone of contention. So with that, I'm gonna wind it up, folks. Like I said, it's been a long day. I'm a little bit under the weather. Although I'm glad to be able to have made it out here at all. It's really important to me. This is my student loan therapy, so to speak. I figure if I'm not out here fighting, if I'm not out here trying to inform and educate and inspire the group, then as far as I'm concerned, I'm part of the problem. And people don't like to hear this, and sometimes people have said to me, "Well, it's probably do you really want to say that? Do you think you're putting people off?" Well, a long time ago, I might have felt that way, but at this point, if you're not pitching in, if you're not at least coming here in the morning and helping out with the daily actions that take about 10 or 15 minutes and are incredibly important, and it is so important that they be done in as large a number as possible, we're reaching the point, folks, you're becoming part of the problem. Inaction. What is it? Was it Voltaire, I think, or Edmund Burke? I forget who the philosopher who said the only conditions necessary for evil to exist is for good people to do nothing. I've obviously transposed that a little bit. But that's the truth. The longer we sit on our hands, the more, or wring our hands, or sit back and watch the people who are in this group that take this very seriously, and we have a decent number of people who put in the time, they put in the work. You need to have their backs. Don't leave them hanging out there. So that's it. I'm just kind of starting to ramble at this point, but I appreciate those of you who have been regular attendees of these live streams, and I tell people, especially if you're new, if you really want to get educated on this issue, if you really want to get a deep, powerful understanding, you got to tune into Alan Collins' live streams. He's on like 5 nights a week, I think, 4 or 5, 5 nights, and this is where you get it. You don't have to be the foremost expert on this topic to be an effective advocate and lobbyist for it, but it can help. So that's it. That's my message, I guess, tonight is, we need to adopt that attitude of, our own righteous indignation. I am so sick and fucking tired of people who have absolutely no idea or no clue what this entire thing is about, flinging around their righteous indignation. It's time, folks, for us to, come to terms with the reality that, they are the predators. We are the prey. And when we win this fight, and we will, this system will collapse one way or another. We'd just like to have some input into how specifically that collapse unfolds, because there are ways it could happen that really would not be necessarily favorable to us, and we want to avoid that at all costs. We need to take control of the dialogue. A couple of weeks ago, we were getting pounded by all kinds of from all different directions in media, and that's been turning around considerably lately. It's not just people from student loan justice. There are some sources from others. For example, I noticed a couple of great articles in the Guardian recently, in which members of our group were interviewed and able to input some of their experiences and with this issue. That's just one. There are many others. We are not alone in this fight, but we need the look. Things change when the politicians begin to realize that we have finally come together as a cohesive, single-minded group of pissed off voters. So come on down every day. Check out, see what the daily activities are. Take you 5-10 minutes. If you want to fill a larger, more exotic role in what we do here, you're more than welcome. There's a lot of different ways you can fit in here. So happy to have you along. So that's it. I'm gonna end it there. I lasted longer than I thought I would. I'm Ed McKinley from Massachusetts. This is studentloanjustice.org live stream. It is May 24th, Tuesday. And once again, thank you everybody that comes here pretty regularly for these live streams, and for those who watch the recorded version that does stay on our web page, our Facebook page. You just need to scroll down. And I hope I made some kind of sense tonight, because I'm flying by the seat of my pants. Thanks everybody. Have a good night.